Dirk Poot studied business administration at Nyenrode and medicine at the University of Eusthatius School of Medicine. He's self-employed as an ICT consultant and PHP MySQL programmer for medical applications. Since 2012, Poot is party leader of the Dutch Pirate Party, which took an active part in the 2010 parliamentary elections. The Pirate Party supports a free internet as a condition for an open and democratic society, as a sort of inspiration of knowledge, and above all, as a source of critical information. Mr. Poot, your party, which operates on an international level and is even present in the parliament in Sweden, advocates what you call an open information society. At first sight, the procedures that underlie and support terrorism legislation, as was so clearly put by both Vermon and Van Bennekom, seem to contradict the ideals of such a society. Often deliberations on terrorism are held in secret. How, in your view, would an open society have to deal with the question of terrorism?
First of all, party leader is what I'm called because of the Dutch political tradition. But the Pirate Party believes in the leaderless revolution. So they made me their spokesperson for the elections, but basically I'm just a pirate of many other pirates. We think political leaders are part of the problems that we've been hearing about today. The lack of democratic substance that we see in our society today, the lack of rule of law. We believe that a main reason of that is our political leaders. So we'd like to do away with the term political leader, actually. We've had, as a human society, we have a lot of fears and a lot of ways of dealing with those fears. 2 days from now, we're going to exorcise all the demons from society by lighting fireworks. Buildings like these have been used to keep our society safe from witches who were weighed here and thrown in the water, and if they drowned, they were innocent after all. So we have a lot of different fears that we try to guard ourselves against, and terrorism is not something of the last ages. I remember when I was growing up in the 70s, we had trains and schools hijacked. We had attacks on the Olympic Games in München, and there were planes hijacked all over the world. It's only since 9/11 that we have gotten into a global panic about terrorism. And we feel that in that panic we have allowed ourselves to be cheated out of a lot of democratic and civilian rights. Since 9/11 we've seen the Patriot Act that was mentioned before. We have in Europe the European Extradition Treaty, which makes it easier to move terrorists from one country's prison to the next. And we started with heavy internet monitoring and data retention of everything we do online, everything we see online, everybody we talk to, because we want to capture that one terrorist that may be out there. I'm wondering if terrorism really is a growing problem, or if we are just basically steadily expanding the definition. For example, if you look at the US Patriot Act, which was very quietly, silently prolonged again last year under Obama. Right now, somebody has been sitting in prison in solitary confinement for over 2 years. He's being persecuted on the Patriot Act, not because he's a terrorist, but because he is accused of exposing US war crimes by giving information to WikiLeaks. We're talking about Bradley Manning. Definitely not a terrorist, but persecuted under the US Patriot Act. The European Extradition Treaty is now being used to keep Julian Assange silent for over 2 years, resulting him in being holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London and being totally incommunicado. The internet monitoring and data retention laws that were put there to protect us from terrorists are now even used to prove the case against CIA directors accused of improper sexual relations, which has nothing to do with terrorism. So it seems that in order to avoid death by a terrorist bomb, we have chosen for ourselves a death by 1,000 legal cuts to our liberties and rights. Further, those anti-terrorist laws are that there's a terrible sliding scale in it. You see now that journalist organizations are being targeted by anti-terrorist laws. Animal rights activists are being targeted by terrorist laws. File sharing sites are being raided by anti-terrorist units. Occupy protesters are being persecuted with anti-terrorist laws. So it seems that since those laws were taken effect, we have rapidly expanded the definition of who those laws would apply to. And we think that is a very dangerous process. There was this ACTA treaty that was people talking about beginning of this year. There was a huge online protest against it. The people from the European Commission even called anti-ACTA protesters terrorists. So I mean, everybody can become a terrorist within a year if you don't pay attention. And we feel that the main problem is that parliaments have not protected our democratic rights. But they seem to have abused that global fear that we have to take away those rights. So the question is, do parliaments still serve the people, or do they serve, as Mr. van Bennekom said, merely the states or the players behind the states? We feel that people have lost contact with, and we've lost the control of our representatives in what we call a representative democracy. Are we being represented by people who do what we want, or are we being represented by people with their own agendas? And therefore the Pirate Party would like, we're striving for a political revolution. And we feel that we should step away from that whole idea of representative democracy, because that was a necessity, because we couldn't communicate with each other. We have 16 million people in Holland. It's only since a couple of years that every Dutch person can communicate with every Dutch person, since we've had the internet. We feel that giving people the chance to vote through internet, to give them unlimited votes on all the problems that they see arising in their society, and to allow them to discuss those problems amongst each other and come up with solutions and laws, will be a much better way of tackling the problems of the 21st century and growing towards a real democracy. The representative democracy that we've had so far has been just an in-between step. And now we have the technology to make the next step possible. It should be so much easier to have people come together on an online forum and talk to real experts. I mean, the 150 people we have in The Hague and in all parliaments of the world, they are not experts. They just come in there for 4 years, 8 years, and they rely on the machinery that's already there for their information, for their guidance. They rely on very strict party political lines for their decisions, and not so much on what the people want. And we feel that a free internet where everybody is able to find their own information and to participate in these national parliaments, allowing people to trust other people based not on the fact that he or she has been a party member for 20 years, but on the fact that he or she has been studying a subject for a lot of time, has written thesis about that subject. That's a much better way to trust people, to give people influence. And liquid democracy is the way that we can either vote ourselves, or we can say, okay, this is an issue I know nothing about, but this is a person I trust on that. And that person will vote for me, will get my delegation. If that person betrays that trust, you don't have to wait for 4 years in order to vote a new person. No, you can immediately take away the delegation and give it to somebody else. In that way, you get an ongoing national debate with impartial specialists instead of party members behind the party discipline. And that way we'll hopefully get decisions based on actual information and not stale political dogmas. So we believe that the way out of our democratic vacuum that we're getting into is liquid feedback. And we think it holds the promise to take political power away from the old and corrupted power structures. It holds the promise to bring real democracy to old and new democracies. And it might be the only way to stop governments from criminalizing their citizens with an ever-widening definition of terrorism and persecuting them or prosecuting them with an ever-increasing array of legal, semi-legal, and even illegal means. We have lost control of our democracies, and we need to regain that control. Liquid democracy feedback might be a way. We should stop making laws against the people and start making laws by the people again. Thank you.